Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Academy. Now today we're going to talk about a topic a little different from what we've been doing for the last months, really. Instead of reviewing different writers and their take on strategy and tactics and what have you, I wanted to kind of interject a couple episodes where I'm going to talk about some ideas and tactical concepts, skills, things you need. Now I'm sure we've all run into this. We just probably haven't really thought much about it. I could be wrong, but sometimes you need a catalyst, a reminder to take a look at something like this. But the basic question is, when things don't go right on the table, you lose, or if things don't go the way you expected, is it because of bad planning or is it a mistake? Most of us, especially when we're new into a game, we pretty much assume one or the other. We don't necessarily take some time to really evaluate it and try to tell the difference. And why is it important to know the difference? Well, bad planning requires a different set of changes, a different response than mistakes. Okay, and you need to be able to identify which is which. That way, you correct properly and can improve by the next time you're on the table. What I wanted to do is kind of use two historical examples, both out of the World War II, and I think this, pretty much can give us some ideas of how the differences are, how to identify the difference. So I'm going to talk about two different battles. One is Operation Market Garden, and one is the Rapido River Crossing in Italy. Now, I have an opinion based on, my review and my analysis of the events of both of those two battles as to where there was bad planning or where there were mistakes. So I know there's a lot of differences of opinion on some of these things, but bear with me and realize that in both cases there was a lot of in post-mortem review of these two battles, there was a lot of politicking going on and a lot of blame game stuff happening. So you really need to sit back and put aside any of your any national pride or honestly any preconceived ideas you have about how things should have been done or how things were done, and let's really take a look at the details. You can find many videos online, especially Operation Market Garden, the different points of that. But so let's kind of walk through both battles and let's talk about the difference between bad planning and mistakes. So let's look at Operation Market Garden. Operation Market Garden, two parts, real quick. The market part was the drop of the paratroopers on three separate points. Arnhem was the British, and at 3 days later, a Polish brigade. The 101st Airborne Division dropped at in Eindhoven, take the bridge there, and the Magen Bridge was taken, or supposed to be taken, by the 82nd Airborne Division. So that was the first operation, securing and holding those bridges. The second Garden operation was the advance of the 30th Corps, all British armor and infantry, up the base of the highway, for lack of a better term, that connected all three of those to reach Arnhem within supposedly 48 hours. Now, there are a lot of opinions about this, but let's look at the planning side of things. First, there was reconnaissance that indicated there was armor in the area. There was no planning for that. No one made allowance for that as far as within the British division, at least. I'm not certain how much anti-armor the paratroopers in the U.S. side had, but I don't believe it was as well enough. But the British were actually facing British and the 82nd Airborne Division were facing quite a bit of armor that they didn't expect. Reconnaissance and command knew about it, but the troops on the ground didn't. So they were not equipped with enough anti-tank equipment. Now, another planning aspect, the drop zones for the U.S. were pretty well selected. Drop zones for the British were too far away from their point. They were 7 or 8 miles out. The fear being they didn't want to lose any aircraft to anti-aircraft fire. Now, understand this: for the British, they needed to make needed to make multiple trips to get the entire division landed, whereas the Americans had a larger transport force and were able to accomplish it in one jump, or fewer jumps, I should say. So, though there was a need to be careful with those assets, it resulted in the drop being much further away and much harder to reach the objective to secure it. That's the planning side of it as far as the airborne drops. Now, on the plan for attacking up the road, they knew they were going down a road which is going to be a choke point. They knew they had to clear out any resistance ahead of time. They were planning some bombardment and such for that, and then charge is probably the wrong word, but they advanced as quickly as they felt they could up the road, dealt with resistance, and then continued on. They did take casualties all along the way, and of course that did slow them down a bit. Okay, so if you look at the whole plan, it really could have worked. They reached a couple kilometers away from Arnhem. Now, granted, they got it there not in 2 days, but within 3 days. But still, they could have made it. It was eminently doable. Unfortunately, there were some mistakes made along the way. Not planning properly, granted, by not equipping the troops with the proper anti-tank weapons, not dropping them when they needed to be. The 82nd Airborne Division, which was dropped along with the paratroopers command, the British command, all dropped near the Remagen Bridge or Nijmegen Bridge. They did not secure the objective. Their task was to take that and hold that bridge. They did not do that. They chose instead to basically fortify a hill to prevent some supposed counterattack, and then they would go back and deal with that. Well, unfortunately, the counterattack didn't really materialize, and instead the Germans were able to occupy the bridge, and instead of the Allies arriving into a secured bridge and going on, they had the 30 Corps actually had to fight in that town to basically take the bridge that was already supposed to be taken before they could move forward. Weather did play a factor in here as far as the Polish airborne drops later, and communication issues between the British the British paratroopers and the RAF resupplying them did cause some problems in getting supplies in. They kept landing in the German zones. Again, part of the problem of having the drop zones too far away from where the troops needed to be to hold this. So, there are elements of bad planning in Market Garden, but it was not all a bad plan. It was still eminently doable because had this 82nd Airborne Division actually secured the bridge that they were supposed to have in time, the 30th Corps wouldn't have gotten bogged down in that town trying to fight house to house, if you will, to break through and get across. They would have reached Arnhem earlier and would have helped, basically push back the Germans that were in the area, potentially giving a better chance of securing that bridge once and for all and relieving the British paratroopers. So, in my assessment, based on all the different mistakes that were made, Operation Market Garden failed, not because it was a bad plan, but because it was a series of mistakes that were made. There were elements of bad planning within the plan, but overall, it was a risk, which what battle and plan is not a risk, right? But the mistakes that were made as it was being executed, I think, is really what doomed it as opposed to the plan. And let's go down to Italy, and we take a look at the battle around Monte Cassino. This is before the bombing. The problem that the Allies faced is that the U.S. and British were basically pinned down. They couldn't advance around through the roads because the Germans had everything well sighted in along their defensive line. The one thing that they thought they could do, though, is do an outflank by crossing the river, Rapido River. Now, the Rapido River is a small segment. It actually flows into a different river and it changes name. I forget the name of it offhand, but the key is, in this particular case, they had engineers construct a bridge, a footbridge, pontoon bridge, across the river. and the plan was to go, send the troops in across that, getting them kind of outflanking the German positions, putting pressure there so that they would be able to maneuver and get around them. Unfortunately, and this is where I think the Rapido River crossing is all about bad planning, is everything went according to plan. Problem was, the plan did not include significant artillery or vehicular support. It was in broad daylight against well-defended German positions who had everything on the American bank sighted in. They knew their fire lines very well. So even though there was some smoke used to disrupt vision, the Germans knew where to shoot. Okay, and of course, when you see a pontoon bridge across the river, you know where to shoot. Where to bring your artillery down, even if there is smoke in the area. Once they got to the other side, this is only infantry, light weapons. They didn't have what they needed to assault positions that had heavy weapons, especially machine guns and larger guns, mortars and field guns, anti-tank guns. So there was no armor support, no nothing. None of the big guns really helped them out. So there was no preparatory bombardment, which is typical for British but not U.S. There really was no air support in the zone. The attack was going in broad daylight against well-defended, well-fortified positions, and the entire move across the river was wide open to spotting and shooting. And then once they reached the other side, they were pinned down on the the riverbanks, and getting torn up. This, in my opinion, had no mistakes. I didn't see any indication of the movement and actions of the various regiments that were actually involved. I didn't see any tactical errors. I just saw a really lousy plan come into place. Now, why is that important? Well, again, when we do the same thing on the table, we will sometimes lose a battle and think, oh, we just made a mistake here or there. If we just done this, we would have done something different. But in reality, maybe we had a bad plan. Or the other way around, we thought it was a terrible plan because we lost so bad, but in reality, it was just a series of mistakes that foiled the plan. Had we made some slight adjustments to what we had done on the table, not made certain mistakes, the plan would have worked. So when you lose a battle, sit back, think. Replay the battle in your head. Remember, don't just completely disregard what the dice did. Okay, don't worry about that part. Just look at it and then apply all the principles you may have learned. Hopefully, you've reviewed in the previous videos that I've put out on this. Just look at the different tactical concepts and see where you may have not applied them. Number one, in your initial plan. An example would be, did you build your list, assemble your forces, and not bring in enough anti-tank weaponry? If you think about it, in most armies and most systems, you've got multiple sources of anti-tank capability. Infantry, called man-portable weapons, bazooka, Panzerfaust. In 40K, you've got las cannons, what have you. You've got crude weapons or artillery pieces. Then you have different levels of vehicles. Some are light, some are heavy, that can sport some anti-tank guns. Then you've got air support, and maybe even artillery, long-range type stuff that can come in. So there's a lot of different opportunities within a list where you could apply units with anti-tank. But if you only have one or one type, then maybe your plan failed you had bad planning or not building the list properly. Now, if you did have multiple anti-tank options, but maybe you misused them, or maybe you didn't hide your infantry, for example, during the first part of the game, so to get them to the point where they could actually do some damage, and they got shot up too early. Or maybe you moved your tanks into position, but unfortunately weren't paying attention well enough and made the mistake of exposing yourself to enemy fire, or maybe a charge from the enemy infantry, what have you, and you lost some things there. Try to discern the difference between, I built my list wrong, to, I should have done this differently with this particular unit in the game, right? That way you know where to make the make the changes so the next time you'll be in better shape. So hopefully this will help you as you go through your learning curves, regardless of what game system you're playing. Don't give up on the plans you come up with. Always evaluate them to see if did you account for the possibilities properly, and did you give yourself a chance at that initial plan. Did everything have to go right in order for you to win, or was there room in your plan to allow certain things to go wrong? Now, if that's the case, if you've had everything planned well, now look at the mistakes you made and see how much of a difference they made. And eventually, between the two, you'll start figuring out where your planning is deficient and where sometimes your tactical mistakes are causing you problems. Put the two together, fix both of them, and your success will become much more prevalent. Okay? So, hopefully this is going to help. Please comment below, share your experiences, and let me know what you think. So again, thank you for watching. Share, like, and subscribe. If you haven't already, click the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.